The story begins with the Joseon's crown prince, Jin Han, who is with his men trying to recruit some locals for the war. However, the prince has received a notice that the Qing has won over Joseon and is forcing them to break their partnership with Ming. Now the nation of Qing asks for Jin Han as a hostage and appoints him as the successor of Joseon. King Lee's son tells his brother Jin Han to come back alive no matter what, and they have a tearful goodbye. Jin Han's mother and King Lee's son's stepmother, Queen Dowager, is furious and hates the king for letting her son be taken as hostage. Meanwhile, the queen is delighted, for it will be an advantage for her. She quickly bears an heir, called the Prince Royal, to inherit the throne instead of the crown prince. While Jin Han is in Qing, he befriends Prince Rui by playing baduk. This way, he reduces the ransom on other Joseon hostages. Finally, Jin Han is allowed to go home. He is excited to see his brother but is shocked when the king is cold to him. King Lee's son is sick and has been infected with lies by the queen's brother, Kim Jong-bae. He tells the king that Jin Han is working with Prince Rui to be king. They're also busy trying to ally with Chief State Councillor Kang. That is by marrying Jong-bae's son, Myung-ha, to Kang's daughter, Hee-Soo. However, the king's days are numbered, and to complete their plan, they have to get supporters to petition for the Prince Royal to become the successor. Meanwhile, the king refuses to drink the medicine and makes a move on Queen Dowager's attendant, Lady Dong. He kicks out Jin Han, who spends his time in a jisying. Jong-bae sends his man, Hyunbo, to spy on him, but Jin Han realizes and runs off. He hangs out near a river with his guard, Sang-hwa, when he hears some nobles playing baduk with a mysterious player who has never lost. He keeps winning and he keeps getting their baduk stones and tables as a bet. But if he loses, he will reveal his name, but he declares no one can win over him unless it is Jin Han. Jin Han is touched as he watches them and follows him till he catches him near the jisying. Before he can offer to play, Hyunbo makes a commotion, so they will tell him where Jin Han is. He beats the head courtesan, Hong Jang, but the baduk player comes to her rescue by throwing the baduk table at him. Jin Han shows up, rebuking him for what he did, while the baduk player is shocked upon learning that he's the crown prince. As Hyunbo runs off, he vows to punish the baduk player. It is also revealed that Hong Jang, the head courtesan, is Hyunbo's sister, who was one of the hostages, but the baduk player paid her ransom. When the player returns home, it is revealed that she is Hee-Soo, Councillor Kang's daughter. She sneaks out and disguises as a man to play baduk and earn money as ransom for the Joseon hostages in Qing. Meanwhile, Myung-ha, Jong-bae's son, pays Hee-Soo a visit as he has fallen for her and wants to marry her. But she refuses, knowing he can't defeat her in playing baduk. But Myung-ha is determined and says she'll marry her, no matter what. It is also revealed that Kang abandoned her during the war, and she was raised by her attendant, Jagunyan. But she doesn't resent his father and accepts that he was serving Jin Han, who did a lot for their country. The next day, Hong Jang reveals to Hee-Soo that Jin Han has been waiting for her every day, but she says she can't face him as she's embarrassed for what she did last time. As she leaves, Hong Jang notices Hyunbo's men following her. They surround her in an alley, but Jin Han shows up after Hong Jang tells him. As one of the men tries to struck her, Jin Han comes to her rescue, but his arm is cut. Now, as Hee-Soo is worried, she sneaks on him while he is resting. But when she leaves, he stops her, saying, "Why are you getting away from me? Are you guilty of something?" He wants to play baduk with her, but she claims she only plays on a bet. He agrees and they start playing. While their hands touch, Jin Han declares that in one move, Hee-Soo will win. Immediately, she accepts victory without finishing the game. While it rains, he describes it as Mongwoo. Then she decided that her prize is for him to nickname her Mongwoo by writing it in her baduk canvas. Afterwards, he tells her they'll meet and play again, next time it will drizzle. As he gets ready to leave, he struggles and commands her to dress him up. She struggles as she's not used to it, and it seems Jin Han knows why. He notices her slender hands and declares that she's just a wealthy brat who doesn't know the basic things in life. As he went his way, she is thrilled with happiness, thinking that soon they'll see each other again. Hee-Soo confesses to Hong Jang that she's about to lose but pretended to win by accepting the early victory. Her heart races and Hong Jang says she has fallen for Jin Han, but Hee-Soo laughs it off. Short after, Jin Han reveals to Young Bae that he's there to assure him that he doesn't want the throne. In return, the minister should stop spreading the rumors that he's waiting for it. At the palace, the king is seriously ill and the queen tries to make her way inside, but the king only allows Jin Han in. He says that everyone wants him dead and wonders if his brother does too. But when Jin Han cries pleading him to take his medicine, the king is touched. Zhang Bei confides with the queen that the Qing envoy, Interpreter Young, will support Prince Royal as the heir, but in exchange, they will help Qing win the war against Ming. Zhang Bei tries to get the king's approval by provoking him that Jin Han is after the throne. The king can see his lies but accepts the conscription to help Ming, or it may lead to war if he refuses. Upset with Zhang Bei abusing his power, the ministers want to file a petition to dismiss him. But the king has other plans. He tells Kang to send a spy to Ming to tell them they are not being betrayed, and the conscription is against his will. Kang asks for Chu Dalha, who is now hanging out with Hee-Soo. He reveals that Jin Han had reduced the ransom, but now, it has increased again. Meanwhile, Hee-Soo notices that Chu and Hongjiang like each other and leaves them alone. Outside, she spots Jin Han and follows him. He meets Park and the other ministers who suggest backing him as the successor. But Jin Han calls it treason as the king is still alive and that the Prince Royal is the legitimate heir and storms off. Hee-Soo trips behind him and alerts him of her presence. He scoffs that she followed him because she was happy to see him. Seeing that she is hurt, he apologizes and assists her towards the stream. He dips her feet in the water and her reaction makes Jin Han confused as she reacts like a woman. She confesses that she would have lost the game had he not conceded first. They then promise a rematch to decide the winner. When at home, Kang tells Hee-Soo that Jin Han is a threat and a target. While Chu leaves for Ming with the king's message, someone follows him. Hee-Soo wonders how Jin Han will react if she reveals her identity and Hongjiang urges her to tell him the truth. Meanwhile, Queen Dowager and Park are not deterred as they have a plan for Jin Han to become king. Somewhere, Myung-ha's friend, Min Sang-hyo, wants to beat the baduk player and Myung-ha accompanies him. He is shocked to see that Hee-Soo is the undefeated baduk player and runs off. However, when it rains, Hee-Soo pretends to lose and runs off. She is disappointed to see that Jin Han hasn't come. But he does arrive and she's happy to see him. Suddenly, Myung-ha shows up and tells Jin Han that he knows Mongwoo and that they both agreed to play baduk earlier. Thus, making Jin Han leave while confused. Of course, Myung-ha seizes the opportunity to warn Hee-Soo to stop disguising or she'll be tortured if she's discovered dressing up as a man. Then he asks her if the prince is the reason she doesn't want to marry him. She asks back if he still consider her as a potential marriage partner, even she keeps disguising as a man. Myung-ha says no matter what she does his feelings for her still remains, and when he learned that she's doing it for a cause, he tells her he will inform her father about it. Hee-Soo knew it's her end so she went to Hyeongja and cried knowing it's also her end meeting with the prince. Short after, the king gets a word that a spy has been caught by the Qing. As a result, a large group of Qing troops have been stationed at the border and is ready to attack Joseon anytime soon. Myung-ha asks what could be the cause and he was told that there has been a report of a breach of the peace treaty whereby a spy named Chu Dalha was dispatched to the Ming to communicate with them. He was further informed that few years ago, Chu Dalha served as an officer at the Central Army and was seen recently at the courtesan house where Prince Jin Han frequently visits. Afterwards, the ministers and counselors at the court pleads the king to send their army to stop and drive away the Qing's troop. But weak as he is, the king asks Zhang Bei, in charge of the Ministry of War, his decision. Zhang Bei, who is eager about it, tells them they must be prepared for war as everything is inevitable. However, Chief Kang tells the Majesty he is looking for a solution to avoid such thing to happen by going to the border and meet with the troops' commander. Finally, the king agrees and he lets Zhang Bei to accompany Kang. At the border, the troops' commander can't contain himself as he tells that even Prince Rui tells them to fend for themselves and calm down. Then Chief Kang says it is not their will to start an uproar, that they have been putting huge efforts just to maintain peace in between their neighbors. Still, Qing is not happy that they are fraternizing with Ming in secret. Zhang Bei, who has ill intention, asks if Chu Dalha confessed that he received an order from Joseon's king and the court. Thankfully, Chu Dalha remained silent and never confessed a word. Zhang Bei then asks the emperor what they can do to appease their king's wrath. Knowing that it is a violation in their peace treaty, he says it is an act of betrayal. He then orders Zhang Bei to find the man behind the spying. He tells them whoever did it must confess and be punished in front of him. Back to the court, Zhang Bei tells the others that Chu Dalha was recently seen at the house where Prince Jin Han frequently visits. As he intends to tell them the prince has something to do with the spying, Director Park, Jin Han's uncle, tells Zhang Bei to be careful in accusing unless he can give up his life on it once proven wrong. Furthermore, Chief Kang meets the king and asks for his approval as he intends to take responsibility with the spying. Since Chu Dalha is his man, he intends to take all the blame, saving the king from such shameless and dangerous situation while protecting Prince Jin Han, whom Zhang Bei is accusing as the man behind it. Upon learning the situation, Prince Jin Han went straight to the Kangs and almost bumps into Meng Wu. But being dressed as a woman prompts her to stay away, though her father tells her to come and greet the prince. Now, the prince learned that Chief Kang has a daughter. While they talk, Jin Han tells him he should be the one to go to Qing. He was once close to Prince Rui, and maybe he can approach him again this time. But Chief Kang can't let him be, knowing that he is now in a dangerous state. He tells him what it means to be captivated and advises him to try his best to avoid such thing to happen together with the king. Hearing everything, Hee-Soo is in pain knowing that her father will be leaving her once again. However, before Kang arrives at Qing, Zhang Bei sent his man to hand a letter with a bribe. The letter says Jin Han is the mastermind who is behind Chu Dalha's spying. Upon seeing the letter, the commander tells him to forget it as for sure Prince Rui will come to Jin Han's rescue. Learning that the silver is a bribe and not a gift, the general suddenly tells Hyang Zhou he will relay the message but will be away in a while. At the palace, before Kang prepares to go, he bows to the king and says, "Till we meet again." Then Myung-ha tells him he'll take care of Hee-Soo while he's away. Dress as a criminal. He bids everyone goodbye and is ready to meet his punishment soon. It's already late and the king seemed to be tired and lonely as he ponders on the wrong move he made. As he needs a hug from her lady servant, Zhang Bei knocks on the door telling it's an emergency. He says he already find out the culprit and it enraged the king why he's doing it. The fact that it is already resolved as Counselor Kang is already taking it. Then he says that Chief Kang didn't go there to be punished but to seek the emperor's approval for Prince Jin Han to ascend the throne. Once again, the king believes Zhang Bei, who swears his life on it. Now, the king gives him the right to capture, interrogate and punish everyone who is related to the spying, including the courtesan lady and the baduk player being associated to the prince. When Hee-Soo learned that Zhang Bei is torturing Hyang Zhang and others, she comes forward and tells Zhang Bei to stop the torturing and directly asks her instead, as he's the baduk player whom they're looking for. Myung-ha tries to stop her and intervene, but he can do nothing as he is only his father's man. As Zhang Bei enjoys his power tripping, his men started to interrogate, inflicting her pain so she will confess that the prince and Chu Dalha knew each other. But before something worse happens, Jin Han arrives and stops them, saying this kind of harsh interrogation was already stopped many years ago. But Kim Jong-Bei retorts that what he's doing is under the king's approval. Then the prince tells him to directly ask him, as he's the reason of all these, but Zhang Bei says that he will ask him once he gathered evidences. Before he leaves, he commands them to stop the interrogation and waits for him to come back as he will talk to the king first. Just as the king finishes his medicine, Jin Han enters and he was met with a sword. The king tells him he should have killed him years ago when he was taken captive before he could plot with Kang in ousting him, so he will be the next king. Shocked, the prince tells him how could he think of such unthinkable things. The king says Kang must have been tired of him, so decided to connive with Jin Han. But Jin Han retorts that he, the king, is the one who ordered Kang to send a spy to the Ming. As he pleads the king to come to his senses, the more he is furious, saying who is he to order him around. Then as Jin Han says he will not sit back anymore, the king shouts saying he must kill the next person who will bring turmoil to Joseon. As he lifts up his sword, Jin Han stops him, flip him on the ground, and points on him, his own sword. Jin Han intends to calm him down, but the king is shaken and falls on the floor once again. Jin Han breaks down and asks his brother what is it that he needs to do so he will trust and believe him. Then the king tells him to admit that he's the one who sent the spy and must end his life. But before it happened, the king suddenly vomits blood and collapses, imploring Jin Han with his dying words to find out and punish who poisoned him and to find a way at all cost to ascend his son, the royal prince, to the throne. And before he breathes his last he called Jin Han, brother. The king's death causes all kinds of political disorder, but not in a way they expected it. While still in shock, Jin Han seizes the opportunity to manipulate events as best as he can. Knowing that the royal prince is still young and the nation is not in good position, he gets his uncle's support. Then he tells Zhang Bei that the king's final words were that he, the crown prince, should ascend the throne. Entrusting to him the nation's future, as during that time, he was able to convince him and get his trust. He also ensures that the court lady is singing the same tune, making her the witness. Of course, Zhang Bei doesn't believe him, but since the physicians all claim that the king's death was due to an illness and not murder, it's difficult for him to pin down Jin Han. Short after, the battle lines are drawn. Then Lee Jin Han offers some ideas about not really wanting the responsibility of a king, claiming that he'll politely back off if any of the ministers oppose him. As expected, Zhang Bei fights back. As they contemplate, Hyung-jo keeps on suggesting his ideas to Zhang Bei while saying, "You may end up losing everything, while trying to protect something that's yet to be yours." Upset, Zhang Bei tells him to just do the things he's told to do. When they're alone, Hyunbo hears Zhang Bei telling Myung-ha that he is like a hound that bites a tiger's neck. Zhang Bei intends to keep him later. On the other hand, the Queen Dowager is upset that Zhang Bei, in charge of the whole army, seems to be manipulating them to go against Lee Jin Han. She then dictates Jin Han to withdraw the troops from the border and use them to his advantage. Jin Han knew that the security of the borders maintain the nation's safety, and pulling them without valid reason will result into the nation's chaos. However, Jin Han has other plan. Zhang Bei, on the other hand, needs Hyunbo to let Mongwu, the baduk player, to confess that the spy was sent by Jin Han. He tells Myung-ha that once he bleeds and his limbs are broken, he will sing like a canary. Worried, Myung-ha demands to interrogate Mongwu himself. During the interrogation, he requests Mongwu to blame Jin Han as the man behind Chu Dalha's spying so she and her friend Hyung Jang will live. But Hee-Soo didn't abide in him. Then the next day, Zhang Bei brings evidence showing the confession of the baduk player and requests the arrest of Lee Jin Han. However, Lee Jin Han has a witness, none other than Hyunbo, who admits that Zhang Bei's evidences are forged. He betrays Zhang Bei and sides with Lee Jin Han. Now, Zhang Bei seemed to have engineered his own destruction. Days ago, he told the king, he swears his life on it and even tells Jin Han he'd rather die than serve him. Still, Jin Han gives him the chance to admit and repent so he will not be executed, but the more he's brazened. Right there and then, he was executed in front of his son, Myung-ha. After all the mess, the ministers and advisors plead Lee Jin Han to ascend the throne and protect the land and its people. Granting their wish, he ascends and he was proclaimed the king of Joseon. Right after, Hyunbo, who sided with Lee Jin Han, shows up and state his wish to punish Mongwu and Hyungjang because of conniving with Chu Dalha. In a matter of days, King Jin Han gives everyone their punishment, including Myung-ha, who is banished though left alive after the queen begs for it. The queen herself is sent away to become a monk if he wants her son alive. Meanwhile, Hee-Soo, who trusts Lee Jin Han to come back and save them, seems to have done a decision she'll regret because in one step ahead, things are about to turn into hell. That is when King Jin Han announces that all who commits treason will be receiving their due punishment. Mongwu tried to plead the king to spare Hyungjang as she is innocent and is already dying because of torture during the interrogation. The king didn't budge, so she reminds him of their promise. But he tells her he's no more an ordinary man who do such things, as he has already his own subjects to tend and political opponents to consider. Hee-Soo and Hyungjang are being sent away with others to serve their sentence, but while along the way, Hyungjang didn't make it. Short after, Hee-Soo manages to escape. She was and fell down by the river, but afterwards, she wakes up alive. 3 years later, the people seem to be living happily under King Jin Han's rule. Then the palace announces a public notice for a strong baduk player to play with the king. Mong Wu, who promised revenge, is coming back after many years to join the contest. Once again, she will be meeting Lee Jin Han, the man who became her enemy. Episode 5 starts with Hee-Soo playing a game of baduk with an elderly nobleman. Then in a voiceover, we hear a woman's voice that talks about the new entry restrictions at the palace. The voice says that the first senior consort was caught of sneaking a shaman into the palace to perform rituals so she could bear the king's first son. The consort claimed that she had the king's approval, but she was exiled nonetheless. When the king learns that it is approved by Lady Dong, he keeps silent as he only listens to her. Every time he gets bored, he heads out to play baduk with Prince Deoxing at Yangchuijing, where the servants are forbidden to enter. Then it is revealed that the person sending the updates is Chu Dao-ha. Recently, the prince hired baduk players to come up to a new baduk move so he could use when playing with the king. But the 3 Huans are wary of the prince. They are the 3 ministers with the surname Huan and are always spotted together. Then we see Hee-Soo sending a sketch of baduk moves to the prince via Master Comb. The prince is impressed and requests to meet the baduk player at the earliest. Hee-Soo is delighted but is also worried that she might have put Master Comb in harm's way. He tells her she must worry about herself and she thanks him for his care and generosity, taking her in during the time she's in dire need, as she is soon leaving. Then again, Hee-Soo is informed that the 6th royal secretary has been dismissed. King Lee scolds his employee over the dying peach tree, the same tree which was planted by the former king in memory of him when he was held captive by the Qing. Now, disguised as a man, Hee-Soo makes her way to the capital along with a few maids. At night, King Lee is playing with Prince Deoxing when he receives the news that a new Qing emperor is chosen and that Prince Rui gave his throne to his young nephew. The prince comments that no matter how strong Prince Rui's authority is, one cannot go against the natural order. For it is the natural order for the son to take the throne after his father instead of the brother. Realizing that it's the same as King Lee, he immediately apologizes and the king seems to understand. Along the way, Chu Dao-ha intercepts Hee-Soo and tells her Prince Deoxing is dead. He died the previous night with the suspicion of murder. It is also revealed that Chu Dao-ha is against Hee-Soo's revenge plan, but he supports her afterwards. At breakfast, while the king is having a meal, the principal director of the Privy Council, the Great Lord and the Minister of War aka the 3 Huans, seek his audience. They seek to dismiss Lee Myung-ha, who did not take action when Qing's wanted trespassers ran away. He did not agree for an extradition either. The 3 Huans urge the king to punish Lee Myung-ha before the Qing envoy arrives to the capital. At night, while Myung-ha is at his post, his servant is worried about him being summoned by the king. Knowing that they didn't do their job well, the servant advises him to run away instead and he will be his guide, but Myung-ha didn't budge. While he's on his way to the palace, his friends are worried he might get a severe punishment and only wish for his luck this time. He was then dismissed as the executive assistant in Weiju and is appointed as the 6th royal secretary. The court members are shocked that he's not punished. However, the king added that Myung-ha is to revive the peach tree in the royal garden. If he cannot do it in the given period, then it would result to his dismissal and punishment. Afterwards, the king proceeds to announce his wish to build a jitterying. It is a post where the appointed person would come to play baduk with the king. Then he announces that everyone is welcome except the officials regardless of rank. Then Lee Jin Han's uncle, Lord Park, says that he could have told him in advance so he could arranged for baduk players. Then King Lee warns him to stay away from it. He further added that he knows Prince Deoxing works under his orders, implying that his uncle is the man behind the prince's death. He then warns him that once it happens again, he will not let it go. Then his uncle asks the reason for Lee Myung-ha's new appointment. King Lee says it is his job as the king to give appointments while their job is to make Qing accept the decisions he made. His uncle then proceeds to meet Lee Myung-ha by the peach tree, warning Myung-ha to not do anything wrong against the king's generosity. Then Lord Park asks the two Hwans to quietly remove Lee Myung-ha, but the officials decline going against the royal command. He then suggests a delay in giving the appointment letter and will do what is needed. Short after, Hee-Soo and several others take the baduk exam. The officials presiding is surprised to see Hee-Soo, who is disguised as Kang Mong-woo. He remembers Mong-woo as the baduk player from 3 years ago. He tells Mong-woo that he has won, but he didn't give him his baduk table. Mong-woo promises to complete the deal once he becomes a jitterying. The scene goes back to the day when Hee-Soo was saved by her maid-servants. They discuss Hee-Soo joining the palace as Kang Mong-woo and her other maid is worried she might be her end this time. The same night, Court Lady Dong reads out the selected baduk players' names to the king. He is surprised to hear Kang Mong-woo's name. He dismisses her, but she suspects something is amiss. 3 years ago, it was reported that Kang Mong-woo died. Wondering, the king thinks it might be another man with the same name. The next day, Myung-ha meets Mong-woo and confirms his suspicion that Hee-Soo is alive and asks her why she came back. The next round of baduk games begin and Mong-woo is unable to go to the next round because of players' shortage. Then King Lee arrives and confirms Mong-woo's identity. He asks Myung-ha to play against Mong-woo since Myung-ha has not received his appointment letter yet. As a public official, as the game begins, King Lee is closely watching Mong-woo. Then short after, Myung-ha says he lose. Mong-woo asks if he wants to count the stones. Then King Lee says he'll do it. He announces their game and said Myung-ha's lose is due to saving a stone instead of discarding it. Mong-woo counters his analysis saying if Myung-ha hasn't given up and reinforce his region he could have win. The king questions her saying, why would he keeps on fighting when he knew that he'll lose at the end? Ironically, Mong-woo said, why would you look up at the sky when you'll die anyway? The king seems impressed by her brazen words. He then challenges her to become a good gitteryong, but once she disappoints him, he said he will be the one to pull out her tongue. Afterwards, Mong-woo went to the place where Lee Jin Han and Prince Deoxing play baduk for 3 years. King Lee found her there and he asks her questions that he never asked before. He asks her what is the reason she came back. She said she cannot hide even she intends to, as the whole land of Joseon is his. But for him, her answer is not enough. He asks why until now he's hiding his real name. She said she's not hiding it, but she can only reveal her name by a bet. But still, the king is not satisfied, asking her again why did she came back. Mong-woo is dumbfounded and as she cannot say a word. The king added, did you come for revenge? Did you come to murder me? As the king suspects Mong-woo that she came back to murder him, Mong-woo asks why he thinks so. He says if his friend died because of things he didn't do, he will also feel the same. But when Mong-woo says she didn't expect him to admit that Hong Jang has a wrongful death, she added that her friends seem to be happy now wherever she is. This prompts the king to warn her that she must think first of a way in saving herself rather than worrying about her friend. For the king, Mong-woo is already dead 3 years ago, and it would be very easy for him to kill her should he wish to do it. Mong-woo then challenge him to end her life if he suspects her, but he says killing her now is like a child's play. Thus, he will decide when and where to do it. Obediently, Mong-woo says yes. Outside, Myung-ha's friend, whom Mong-woo is indebted to, suggests having a celebratory drink for Mong-woo's success. But Myung-ha warns him to avoid getting close to Mong-woo. Now, Mong-woo asks King Lee Jin what is it that she needs to do to alleviate his suspicion. He warned her not to be swayed by any temptation or self-favors if he wants to win his trust. He mentions, it could be the higher officials, his close families or his enemies that will try to be close to her, and even offers her a fortune as she is now close to the king. She has to avoid all of them and he will only be her friend or patron if she wants to win his trust. Then he warns that once Mong-woo is found guilty of it, the head of the firearms department, Mr. Jo, will have her beheaded. As Mong Wu leaves, Court Lady Dong approaches the young Chiang. Mr. Ju stops her for going inside even though she keeps on insisting. She's upset and says how come Mong Wu, who is a nobody, enters the place, while she, a loyal servant, is barred from entering. With the king's command, Mong Wu is followed by some royal guards. She keeps acting as a man until she's home. Her maids ask how the baduk game went and she said she beats them all. But upon entering the house, Hee-Soo faints and her personal maid is upset. She tells Hee-Soo never to go back at the palace, as her life is really in danger. But Hee-Soo assures her they didn't hurt her, and that she was just tired, as she stays under the sun the whole day. Then Hee-Soo tells Dao Ha about everything that happened. Afterwards, Lady Dong requests the king of her entry into Yangchijing. She reminds him of his promise when she had witnessed for him before ascending the throne. But Lee Jin tells her he already announces to everyone about his rule. Later, he gives in but on the condition that she become proficient in baduk and she has to fight Mr. Zhou to win her place. The next day, Myung Ha is assigned to draft promotion letters. He notices that Hyung Bo will finally return to court. Myung Ha inserts a notice for the king but is reprimanded by his superior. Then he tells Myung Ha to deliver a baduk table. Upon seeing Mong Wu, he asks the reason why she returned to the palace. Mong Wu invites him to join hands in taking revenge upon the king. She will bring down the king as he only tricks his way to get the throne, while Myung Ha will revenge for his father. But Myung Ha says he has to think of it first. Afterwards, the king and Mong Wu play baduk. Mong Wu boldly asks the king if they can play with a bet. If Lee Jin wins, he can do to him whatever he wants. But if Mong Wu wins, then Lee Jin has to grant a wish, whatever it may be. The same night, Dao Ha and Hee-Soo's servant head to the gambling den to collect their shares as they win the game, thus taking all their money. They end up in a fight with the Huan's men, but Hyung Bo relieves the battle. While Dao Ha and the servant leave, Hyung Bo and Mr. Huan meet. Hyung Bo says he relieved the fight to earn Mong Wu's trust, assuring Mr. Huan that he will make Mong Wu kneel in front of him. The following day, Hyung Bo appears in court. He seeks for advice from the principal director, aka the king's uncle. But Park threatens him instead as he doesn't agree with his appointment. Outside, Myung Ha is agitated to see Hyung Bo. When he sees Mong Wu approaching, he shows him another route to Yangchijing and they come across the peach tree. Mong Wu asks him once again if he has already decided in joining hands, but Myung Ha rejects it as he firmly believes that the plot will fail. Then Mong Wu says she's going to arrange for an audience with Grand Prince Munseong and Princess Jangryong to show she is capable, but Myung Ha doesn't believe her. Just then, King Lee Jin arrives. He asks Mong Wu why he visits the Yangchijing without his summon. After Mong Wu leaves, King Lee asks Myung Ha why they are together and thinks they could be planning a rebellion against him basing on their history. Myung Ha denies the claim, and he says he is grateful to the king that despite his crime, he still forgives him and gives him a position. Afterwards, the king's mother makes a move to befriend Mong Wu by using the royal queen who is sick. Upon seeing the queen, Mong Wu learns that she's distressed as she's used by the queen mother. She worries that the king will be upset, but Mong Wu helps her to avoid such thing to happen. The dowager is happy upon seeing Mong Wu and as expected, she offers herself to be her patron. But no matter how she convinces Mong Wu, she declines. Suddenly, King Lee Jin arrives and questions them why they are with the Gerderyong. It comes to a point that the king has to let Mong Wu tutor Grand Prince Minyang, who is interested in baduk. Short after, King Lee warns Mong Wu to be careful with the dowager, as she's not the one who takes things easy, especially when being opposed. He sees through Mong Wu's plans as well as his mother's. Then he asks how Mong Wu will safeguard himself against his mother. She says if things will get out of hand, there's no one she can rely on than the king himself. The king says as long as Mong Wu will adhere to his commands, she will be shielded as she is one of his subject to consider. Soon after, Mong Wu meets with the royal children to teach baduk to the prince. Myung Ha also waits for them, and they are emotional after seeing Myung Ha, their first cousin. At the court, King Lee goes through petitions and heads to Yangchijing and instructs no one to follow him as he leaves. While Myung-ha and Mong-woo talk about the revenge plan, Myung-ha hugs Mong-woo and says he is afraid to hurt her again. He accepts the revenge plan, and as they embrace, King Lee sees them and is shocked of what he saw. As Myung-ha and Mong-woo hug, Lee Jin Han asks them what they're up to. Myung-ha begins to apologize profusely. He mentions he only becomes emotional in seeing the young royals. Lee Jin does not seem to believe it, but he tells him to avoid such thing to happen again. Afterwards, Lee Jin heads to Yangchijing and asks Mong-woo to follow. While they play baduk, the king asks if she and Myung-ha intend to repair their bond 3 years ago. Mong-woo says there's no bond between them, so there's nothing to repair. Lee Jin seems not happy and says Myung-ha seemed to care for her a lot and has the intention of doing it. Then he abruptly ends the game. He then inquires about the young prince's baduk training, and Mong-woo asks for game records to help the prince. While Mong-woo is on his way home, he is summoned by Hyung-bo, the third Minister of Rights. Hyung-bo promised Minister Hwan to bring Mong-woo and have her kneel before him. However, Mong-woo tells them only the king can summon him. Anyone who needs him must come to him instead. Minister Hwan laughs at it, but Hyun-bo is embarrassed and he can't accept how can a lowly bastard declines a minister's call. Then Minister Hwan tells him that Mong-woo is His Majesty's confidant who can decline an offer even the ministers if he wants. As Minister Hwan leaves, he tells Hyun-bo to focus on disbanding the gambling den instead. Still in disbelief, Hyun-bo asks the servant who really is Mong-woo. That is when he learned that Mong-woo is the same person who was persecuted 3 years ago. The next day, he intercepts Mong-woo at the court. He tells her how brazen he is in making his way to the palace knowing he was a traitor who once framed the king. As Mong-woo fires back at him, he intends to slap her, but the king appears. As the king asks Hyun-bo what brings him there, he immediately asks if he really knows the identity of Mong-woo, adding that he is the traitor who tried to frame him before he ascends the throne. But the king asks him back if he thinks he lost his sanity, adding that he is well aware of his Gerdaryong's identity. Afterwards, the king tells the special firearms unit to keep an eye on Mong-woo, as he seems to be always in trouble every time the king is away. While the king, Mong-woo, and the royal children are together, the king accepts the prince's wish of playing with him after his baduk training. Mong-woo assures that if he will focus on it, he can be surely better than his trainer. Meanwhile, Hyun-bo goes to Director Park. He wants Mong-woo gone, so he must do something to expel him. As he tells Park it is time for him to know about the Gerdaryong's identity, he first asks for a request. But Park tells him he's like a well-fed dog who bites his master's hand so he will not fall for his trap. At the court, as they discuss about the king's yearly travel, the king announces that he will be bringing with him the young prince. Some disagree, saying it can lead to a huge cost plus his maidservants who will be tending him. Because of this, the king decided to bring Mong-woo instead, to be his caretaker. Meanwhile, the news of Mong-woo's identity spreads across like a fire. But Mong-woo is not shocked. In fact, everything is happening according to her plan and she is happy to see it fall into place. Then Mong-woo tells Myung-ha to forget that she is Kang Hee-Soo and to cut his feelings for her. Mong-woo warns Myung-ha that the king might already be lying traps for them after seeing them hug. The queen mother is against the prince going with the king and even suggested to Park to eliminate him, but Park advises that they must be careful about such things. He thinks that the king suspects him of murdering the former king. He also thinks Mong-woo might turn to be more helpful than expected. The same night, Lee Jin orders Captain Jo to tail Hyung-bo and also resume tailing Mong-woo. Hyung-bo loses the person on his tail and goes off to bribe another man to severely harm Mong-woo. The following day, Mong-woo heads to the court and crosses paths with Myung-ha, who agrees to Mong-woo's advice but asks for some time to deal with his feelings towards her. Short after, they're startled by Myung-ha's friend who heard them talking about feelings. Myung-ha leaves and the friend advises Mong-woo about the king's erratic behavior during the Jizinj journey each year. He is annoyed by the smallest of mistakes and spends his days at the Yangchijing, even not eating or drinking for days or suddenly leaving the palace without any prior notice. Soon after, everyone prepares to leave for the Jizin's journey. Mong Wu escorts the prince, and they meet the Minister of War and Director Park, who's only there to see who Mong Wu is. Meanwhile, the young prince sets out to see the celebrations. He is curious and wants his journey to be a memorable one. He rushed to a sword fighting ring, and Mong Wu is thrust into the circle. Mong Wu has no intentions of fighting but goes ahead for the sake of the young prince. She has skills but is later shoved into the ground. Before his opponent strikes her, King Lee meddled and challenged the man to give him a good fight. Afterwards, he says a few words of advice and encouragement to the audience. As he asks the two what they're doing there, Mong Wu suddenly faints in his arms with her wound bleeding. Immediately, the king calls for the royal physician and Mong Wu is taken to the king's personal residence to get treated. Mong Wu refuses treatment, citing it is an old wound and he just need to rest. Later that night, Hyung Bo's hired henchman refuses the job offer to kill Mong Wu. He returns the payment and he says he can't do it even he gives him a fortune. Short after, Mr. Ju finds Hyun Bo before he can get away. The next day, it is raining and Myung-ha wonders if the king will go again to his insanity. While Mong Wu is in the rain, a drenched Lee Jin arrives and see Mong Wu in the rain as well. He asks her why is he there and Mong Wu says it's the drizzle. Lee Jin ushers Mong Wu inside or they might catch cold but she refuses saying, I beg your pardon. He then asks if Mong Wu dislikes him but Mong Wu is spellbound. Lee Jin says he likes her, and as if she's struck by something, he says, you should not be startled as I'm just stating what I feel. Lee Jin's confession to Mong Wu was heard by the court maids and the exchange of rumors about the king being attracted to men spread like fire. While Lee Jin and Mong Wu are engaged in playing baduk, he advises her to play in the offensive or she'll lose. She did it as she was told and she tells him she must take the golden opportunity. Surprisingly, she won the game. Mong Wu tells him it's not about her victory, but it's about his lost, saying he should have won should he not lost focus that made him caught off guard. Then he smiles as he admits it in silence. Meanwhile, Park and other ministers discuss the rumor about Lee Jin and Mong Wu. The Minister of War thinks Mong Wu should be expelled. But it won't be an easy task. The next morning, Mong Wu is given a cold shoulder by everyone at the palace premises. Myung-ha tries to ask Mong Wu about her plan as the petition in the court will be coming soon. Mong Wu says the king's favoritism towards him is just pretense. He won't be doing anything to silence the rumors either. As she says that Lee Jin is his sworn enemy, Myung-ha asks if that is really what she feels. At night, Myung-ha is cornered by Hyun Bo and his men. Hyun Bo asks Myung-ha to arrange for a meeting with Mong Wu but he hesitates. Hyun Bo keeps telling he also wants to see him just like how the king does, but Myung-ha tells him to shut up and move while he's civil. At Mong Wu's, the helpers discuss the rumor wherein the king never consummated with any of his consorts, even the queen. Even Lady Dong, who seemed to be his favorite, never get the chance. The next day, Court Lady Dong is summoned by Director Park. He threatens her that he will end her once she deceives him again. Scared of her life, Court Lady Dong asks the king to dismiss her, but if he can't, he must spend a night with her. Still, the king dismisses her request as he has no intention of doing it. Feeling humiliated, she visits the Queen Dowager and asks her to arrange for Lee Jin and her to spend the night together. The Mother Queen hesitates, but when she mentions about him being attracted to men, she gives in. The next day at court, a petition is filed to dismiss Mong Wu as Jadaryong. Lee Jin is agitated by it and leaves the court. Then Director Park hands him a paper with the exact date for Lee Jin to consummate with Lady Dong. Park says that if they'll consummate, he'll produce an heir, then the rumors will stop and Mong Wu will not need to be dismissed either. Afterwards, Mong Wu is summoned by the queen. She informs Mong Wu about Lee Jin and Court Lady Dong's night of consummation and Mong Wu is surprised. Later that night, Hee-Soo meets with Chu Dao-ha. Dao-ha is concerned that their plans will be ruined if Senior Court Lady Dong manages to produce an heir for the king. But Mong Wu says that the heir would only make him as a tyrant king and can lead him to dethronement because the woman who will give birth is the late king's woman. The next day, Mong Wu and Lee Jin play baduk. Mong Wu asks if Lee Jin is troubled by the rumors that he's attracted to a man. He says he is not. As a king, it is his duty to understand fascism. He says even if people will laugh at him, he will just laugh with them. This time, they made a bet to go out and see if the king will really laugh should he hear them say such rumors. While they're on their way, Lee Jin offers to buy Mong Wu a baduk table, but Mong Wu asks for a food item instead. They venture further and they seem to be having fun. When Mr. Lee orders Mr. Zhou to find someone talking about the rumor, he runs right away. Then Lee Jin asks Mong Wu if he was too harsh. Mong Wu replies that even he'll ask him to pluck the moon, Mr. Zhou will do it. Then he says, for sure he's already complaining in silence. Lee Jin says it would be a miracle if Mr. Zhou didn't curse him this time. As Mong Wu laughs, Lee Jin looks at him longingly. Then he says, he would have married Mong Wu if he was a woman. Just then he hears a bunch of women talk about the king being attracted to men. At night, court lady Dong is being dressed for her special night with the king. Elsewhere, Myung-ha asks Mong Wu if she can avoid the firearms unit for a while. They talk somewhere and that is when he tells her that he already cut his feelings towards her, so she must do the same, implying about her feelings towards the king. As Myung-ha leaves, a courtesan arrives and Mong Wu asks her how to cut one's feelings. The courtesan says one should go where their heart takes them until the very end of the road and only then they will find out the futility of love. Mong Wu ponders over the courtesan's advice and gets drunk. Shortly after, the soldiers report that Hyung Bo and Mong Wu have disappeared. Upon hearing this, Lee Jin is not happy. Just in time, Lady Dong arrives for the consummation and the king has to face her first. While going home, Mong Wu keeps remembering the king's words that he should have married her if she's a woman. Thinking that he will be sleeping with Lady Dong that night, Mong Wu wonders if it is the food she ate that is making her heart painful. Before sleeping by a tree, she said she must let her feelings go. At the king's chamber, Lee Jin tries to bring Lady Dong in bed, but no matter how he tries, he can't do it. He storms out as he's worried about Mong Wu. Right beside the tree, he finds her there. Brings her at Mr. Kang's house, which is her own house, but they didn't know. Mr. Zhou informs the guards to secure the perimeter in secret. Now Lee Jin has to tend Mong Wu to let her sleep comfortably, but when he begins to undress her she wakes up and tries to cover her chest. This time, the king realizes that Mong Wu is in fact a woman. After a moment of losing words, he reminds that her deceit will bring to her end. But Mong Wu didn't redeem her wish yet. So before she'll receive her death, she moves forward and kisses him. He is stunned and at a loss of words. But he can't hold it, so he kisses her back. As their kiss becomes deeper, Mong Wu comes to her senses, but she ushers Jin Han down and they passionately kiss each other, making their unresolved feelings melt away. As they're going more intimate, Jin Han remembers everything that happened related to her and he now understands why. Having awake all night, he now understands why his heart was torn into pieces when he learned about her death many years ago. It's already midnight yet both of them cannot sleep. Jin Han cannot contain the series flashbacks of memories and emotions that is suddenly flooding his mind, so he tells her he'll not ask about her real name and why she disguises as a man. He tells her he's already fallen for her long ago and knowing that she also loves him is already enough for now. While in a meeting, Director Park receives a message that the king didn't bed Lady Dong and went out of the palace instead. Everyone has their own say about it, then Minister Huan bickers with one of them. He says it is only natural for him to run away since the court keeps on pushing him to do something that is against his will. Then they discuss Qing's slow progression towards Joseon. One of the members suggests sending an envoy escort to get a check on Qing's activities. Their eyes are all into Minister Huan as he has the means in doing it, but he hesitates. Just then Hyun-bo steps in and take the lead to go instead. Lee Jin wakes up early the next morning and leaves a sleeping Hee-Soo without a word. But she is awake. Then the king leaves Mr. Jo a word to relay to the Gurdaryong. Back at Hee-Soo's house, she seems to have missed everything. She remembers her father who was sent to Qing and became a criminal. Then, before going, she goes to her room and gets the pouch that she's supposed to give Hyung Jang. As she went out, Captain Jo is at the door waiting for her. He says he is there to relay a royal command that she will be confined and will stay to her lodging due to neglecting her duties because of intoxication. She's asked to stay put until the next royal command. Back to her maid's house, Mong-woo heads inside to freshen up. Her personal maid goes into a fit of questions, then she tells them she went to her house. Her maid is also worried about the Qing envoy's arrival. Then Mong-woo tells her that the king has found out that she is actually a woman. At the palace, the head eunuch tells Lee Jin that court lady Dong has taken ill after the previous night's incident. He orders them to summon her, but they are given orders by the Queen Dowager. He goes to the Queen Dowager and informs of his desire to give senior consort Dong a house and appoint her as his concubine. The Queen Dowager is more upset and the king excuses himself immediately. Meanwhile, Minister Hwan, who knew that the king will not approve, protests against Hyun-bo's addition to the envoy. But Park says the king will agree to the decision if he wishes to keep Kang Mong-woo as the Jadaryong. At the king's chamber, court lady Dong accepts the house offer but does not accept her appointment as a concubine since the Queen Dowager would not allow it. Short after, Park arrives and presents the king the petitions of Kang Mong-woo's removal. He expresses his relief over Mong-woo's confinement, but Lee Jin tells him to bear in mind who is in power. The director then proposes Hyun-bo's appointment to lead the envoy escort to receive the Qing envoy. He justifies his choice and the king allows them 3 days to bring the Qing envoy to the capital. If not, he and Hyun-bo will be punished. Then Park puts a counter-condition that if they made it in 3 days, Mong-woo should be dismissed and will be exiled from the capital. Later, Minister Hwan goes to his daughter aka the Queen and talks about Hyun-bo leading the envoy. They discuss about how Park is trying to control everything and how they are falling weak and powerless within and outside the court. Then Grand Prince Munseong drops by to visit the Queen. They seem to be getting closer and Minister Hwan is surprised. Meanwhile, Lee Jin inquires about the progress of the peach tree. Myung-ha says he already used some mixtures and is under observation. The king remembers the hug between him and Mong-woo and he feels more jealous knowing that Mong-woo is a woman. He then proceeds to the Yeonchejeong and commands Mr. Jo to keep searching for a particular item that is lost. Later that night, Hee-Soo meets Myung-ha for a private meeting. Myung-ha tells her that she has been placed in confinement for protection. And Hee-Soo feels that Lee Jin has set a trap for Director Park. Myung-ha says his priority now is to protect the young royals from any harm as they may face difficulty once the Qing envoy arrives at the capital. Afterwards, Chu Dao-ha has returned from his visit to Master Kom, aka Kim Jae-yam, the elderly man who takes care of Hee-Soo 3 years ago. He informs Hee-Soo that some officials keep on persuading him to fill up a vacant position but is undecided yet. Moreover, Dao-ha is also worried that if the king will not call for her then their plan will go in shambles. He then offers himself, if things will not go as planned, he will take the initiative. The next morning, Lee Jin receives the news that Qing's chief envoy Padon has arrived at the Moa guest house. Park intercepts Lee Jin and asks him to receive the emperor's letter, but Lee Jin feels sick and asks him to accept it on his behalf. Then he reminded him of the promise that Mong-woo will be expelled once the envoy will arrive in 3 days. Park cannot wait anymore, so he immediately commands the soldiers to arrest Mong-woo and bring him to the state tribunal. Myung-ha is immediately notified and he rushes to speak to the king, but the Hwans stop him. Short after, Mong-woo dresses up to go out but is met by the soldiers to be arrested. It is nightfall, and the celebration feast for the Qing envoy's welcome is underway. Lee Jin thanks the envoy for making the journey, but the envoy commented that he is disappointed as he expects something better. Then the envoy asks about the Gurdaryong, whom he heard to be an excellent baduk player. Park tried to protest as the king already promised to arrest him. But the king reprimands him for giving more importance to his own promise than that of the guest. Now, Mong Wu is brought into the banquet upon Lee Jin's order. Then the envoy says he would like to play a game of baduk with Mong Wu, and if he wins he will decide Mong Wu's fate. If he loses, Director Park can decide for it. The men agree on this bet and the baduk game begins. Episode 10 begins with the baduk game underway between Mong Wu and the Qing envoy. But before the game starts, Mong Wu was brought into a private place instead of the tribunal. There she met the king who is waiting for her. He tells her she must be punished for not doing her duty as Gerdaryong, and shouldn't think of what happened that night as an excuse. She tells him not to worry for she already erased it in her memory. The king didn't expect it so he came to her, hugs her and says he missed her. She is relieved as she thought the king will not call for her anymore. Just then, he told her that she was confined to deter the court from attacking her. Then he added as his Gerdaryong. She will come to him immediately every time he needs her, and so is he to her. Back at the party, the Qing envoy planned to bring Mong Wu to Qing should he win the game. While Park wants her to be expelled from the palace. Neither of the bet can bring Mong Wu to her favor, so by using her own baduk skills, she was able to bring the game to a tie position where no one wins and no one loses. Afterwards, the Qing envoy informs King Lee of a letter sent by Prince Rue. Director Park, who is always nosing around, knows the content of the letter. Prince Rue has apparently expressed his wish to marry Princess Jangryong. The king is troubled by the news and the next day the court members urge him not to accept the proposal. Hyung Bo and Director Park promotes Prince Rue's intentions, but Minister Huan suggests sending another woman of similar nobility. After giving some thought, the king announces that he will accept the proposal. Later, Princess begs the king to not let her marry Prince Rue of Qing. She said she has promised her late mother to look after her young brother. But despite her plea, Lee Jin says he has to do his duties as the king of the nation and hence the marriage will take place soon. Despite Mong Wu suggests the king to decline the proposal and despite the king wants to do the same, he cannot do it because once it happened, Prince Rue's regency will not push through. Moreover, the Qing's envoy tells King Lee that Joseon's rejection of the proposal can lead to a ban on the repatriation of Joseon citizens in Qing and can lead to war. Then the king says that he wants to be king so that he can protect those that he loves. But in the end, he needs to protect his seat first before he can protect others. He said, king has power yet he is powerless. This time, Mong Wu seemed to be touched by his words. As Director Park and Queen Dowager want the princess to be married away into Qing. Myung Ha, who is their closest relative, doesn't like it. But Mong Wu, who understands the king's position on the matter, tried to convince them by substituting the princess with a spy. Mong Wu says it is to their advantage as they can determine what really is the intention of Prince Rue. The young prince says it is despicable to send her sister thousands of miles away while they're still young and without parents, but since he trusts Mong Wu, he will approve of it. Meanwhile, as the king and Mong Wu are engaged in baduk, the king says he's going for a hunt with the Qing's envoy the next day. He says he wants Mong Wu to come with him, but she hesitates as she worries that she might not be able to contain her feelings and might distract the king. At night, Mong Wu's maid tries to warn her that she must stop her revenge knowing she has feeling for the king. Mong Wu's is firm that she will use it to her advantage and dethrone the king. But this worries the maid as she is endangering her life once again. After the sick queen requests Mong Wu to look after the young prince, court lady Dong arrives and the queen reprimands her. But she tells the queen that the orders to replace the maids were given by the queen dowager. Then as they leave, Lady Dong tries to scare Mong Wu by saying the king is not interested to anyone except her. She tells Mong Wu he has given her a house and be his concubine anytime she wants. Meanwhile, the vice envoy of the Qing wishes to meet with the princess as he will be handing her some gifts from Prince Rue. The princess tells them they have to wait for the king to arrive first, but the court lady says the queen dowager has already given the approval. Now, the princess has to switch places with Bun Yang, her maid. The vice envoy must not see the princess' face, but Director Park urges the princess, making sure that there will be no substitution should the opposing party think of it. At night, Mong Wu relays the events to Myung Ha. Mong Wu has prepared everything from his side for her plan to succeed. Bun Yang bids an emotional farewell to Mong Wu and others. The next morning, the princess greets the king and bid farewell to everyone, but the king is unaware that the real princess won't be going to Qing. Bun Yang dresses up as the bride for Prince Rui and Grand Prince Munseong arrives to bid his farewell to the princess. As they escort the princess away, one court lady finds it suspicious. The court lady informs the Queen Dowager and Park has his suspicions, so he rushes out to verify. While the Grand Prince and Mong Wu are playing baduk, Myung-ha arrives with the news that Park suspects their ploy and is on his way to verify the suspicion. He reaches the spot and shouts at the princess to show her face, but the envoy stops him as it is not only a disrespect to the princess but to Prince Rui. Meanwhile, as Mong Wu and Lee Jin play baduk, Mong Wu looks uneasy and the king suspects she might be ill. Just then, Mr. Zhou arrives informing that Director Park requests an urgent audience. Mong Wu knows it is about the switching, so she'll have to tell him everything before Park will do it. Now, Mong Wu has to be honest to the king about the princess swap or she will be suspected with their plan to dethrone him. She admits that she planned everything and that she dragged Myung-ha and the Grand Prince into it. The king is furious on learning he has been deceived. He tells her once again the reason why he accepted the proposal. He said her crime is high treason against him. And she must not think that he will just let it go just because he's in love with her. She explains that she had been into such kind of painful experience since young, so she's the one who only understands the princess. She said she will accept her crime and even if she'll be killed, her love to him will still remain. This calms the king and Mong Wu adds that interpreter Young never saw the real princess, implying that they are safe. Afterwards, Park tells the king that Myung-ha, the Grand Prince and the princess have committed a treacherous crime by faking the princess and deceiving His Majesty. He claims that interpreter Young knows and the king calls Mong Wu to testify. She agrees as she had witnessed Young meeting with the princess. Now it turns out that Park falls into his own trap. How come the envoy had met the princess without his approval? Knowing that Park deceived him once again, the king says he'll have to let go of it as of now. Park threatens to take the matter to Prince Rui, but the king implores that once he'll do it, the position of Joseon will be in danger. The king threatens that once the matter will reach Prince Rui, it will be him that will be executed. Meanwhile, the king orders the chief royal secretary to help find a safe house for Princess Jangryong in Beijing. He then plays baduk with Grand Prince Munseong and teaches him how to govern peacefully. The prince tears up as he apologizes for deceiving him to protect his sister. Furthermore, Park tells Mong Wu that he wanted to save him during the ascension, but the king sacrificed him for the sake of the throne. He adds that like the king abandoned Kang Hee-Soo, her father, he will abandon her as well when it suits him. On her way home, she wonders why royal guards are watching her. She trips and the king catches her. Inside, they talk about Bunyang and Mong Wu said her parents were killed during the war and that she was adopted by her neighbors who doesn't have a child. The king assures her that both Bunyang and the princess are safe. Mong Wu thought the king is angry at her, but he said he's more angry at himself as he now understands why she tried to help the princess. He is sad that he had to sacrifice someone just to be king. However, he loves her and will explain it all to her one day. He then asks if she's willing to stay by his side despite the burden of being a king. As she walks home in a daze, Dalha confronts her. He wonders if she is being swayed as she claims that the king may have his reasons. Dalha reminds her how the king sold him to Qing, how he betrayed her and her father as well. He wants to kill the king, but she asks for more time. As part of their plan, they get Kim Jae-nam to court and the king appoints him Inspector General. But this causes a change of heart and Jae-nam backs out from Hee-Soo's plan to dethrone the king. He reasons that Lee Jin is not a puppet but a resolute man with a soft heart. Hee-Soo is not deterred as she tells Myung-ha and Dalha that they will make a move when Park tries to steal the throne. Elsewhere, Munseong keeps the sickly queen a company and she feels bad. She asks Mong Wu how she can keep the prince safe as his life now is already in danger. Mong Wu suggests that they need to make him the crown prince before they'll kill him. Afterwards, Mong Wu goes to see the king with her answer. She will be by his side and is willing to endure with him. As they hug to gratify their feelings, lightnings and thunders strike and a fire starts somewhere. Now, the peach tree that his brother King Lee Sun had planted for him catches fire and Lee Jin thinks it is a sign that he should not have taken the throne. He is in agony and he asks his mother if she's not worried about it, but she only says his words are scarier than the thunders and lightnings. The king also wonders if Lady Dong knows who poisoned his brother. But she's too nervous even spilling the medicine in front of him. When she's alone, she remembers the late king assaulting her. Meanwhile, Queen Dowager and Park decide to get Lee Jin a new queen and Grand Prince Munseong a wife, which will be an excuse to expel him out by the court. While Min Ji-hwan is excited as he believes the new queen will be selected from his family. At court, Jae-nam says the tree is a sign to right the wrongs by rooting out the corruption that is sickening the land and its people. By doing it, it can transfer the cursed into blessings. His words seem to give the king a new idea of letting the chief royal secretary to go and find out about the problems that's been arising and get a solution for it. While Mongwu and the prince play baduk, Mongwu asks what he thinks of his majesty. He says he is scary at times, but he is also not. He says even he heard people say the king will kill him one day, he still believes that he will not do it, because the king that he knew will protect him, even Myung-ha. However, Myung-ha thinks that one day the prince will realize how evil the king is. He declares that no matter how good to him the king is, it can never remove the fact that he is his enemy who killed his father. On her deathbed, Queen Oh convinces his father with her last wish, to support Munseong to be the crown prince. But Minister Oh is in a daze when he notices Hyunbo bringing expensive gifts for Queen Dowager and realizes that his nieces will be pushed for the new queen's selection. Their reason is because Hyunbo is easily manipulated. The Queen Dowager isn't happy, but Park has a plan to maintain the two Hwans to his side to get support. He then offers Min Ji-hwan's daughter as the bride to Grand Prince Munseong. Ji-hwan is furious as he thinks his daughter will be married to the Grand Prince and not into the king. Being aware of this, Mongwu and Myung-ha take advantage and meet with Ji-hwan. They tell him he cannot refuse the offer, but he can support Munseong as the heir so his daughter becomes wife of the future king. Convinced, Ji-hwan accepts the offer. When Mongwu meets the king, he decides to plant a new tree in place of the peach tree. He said the heart is really a fickle thing, wishing them to live when you love them but death when you hate them. It turns out that the king is explaining what it means to be captivated and what a king must avoid. He said if the tree has died, just move on and plant another one, using the past as an example to grow a better one. Elsewhere, Mongwu tells Myung-ha that maybe the king is looking for an heir, and it is his nephew, Munseong. However, Myung-ha doesn't believe it and suspects that Mongwu is being swayed by the king. Meanwhile, Park tells Hyunbo to petition for Munseong's marriage and must be ousted from the palace. However, before Hyunbo can speak, Minister Oh petitions to have Munseong become the heir as per the queen's wish. Jae-nam agrees by his petition while Park is shocked and furious about the idea. Of course, Ji-hwan, who is now with Minister Oh, has a solution. The king must adopt Munseong as his son, making him the official heir. The mother queen is upset and disagree in adopting the prince, and just before the king went his way, the queen says it will not happen unless she's dead. Meanwhile, as Mongwu waits for the king, she hides when Park suddenly shows up and asks for an audience. Park shouts at the king why he's adapting his nephew despite what happened. But Lee Jin reveals that he only approves it to put the court and nation at ease. And when the time comes, he will have him expelled and banished. Mongwu is horrified while Park smiles as he likes what he's hearing from the king. Soon after, the king adopts Munseong as his heir and Queen Oh dies peacefully as the prince now has a father to look after him. At night, Hee-Soo meets Dalha, who insists that Munseong will always be at risk as long as the king is alive. Then he said he must put an end to the king's life. Once again, he asks Hee-Soo's decision. Thinking of what she heard about the king's plan against the prince, she told Dalha to do it as he wish. However, she's not happy and her maid found her crying outside. She says until now, she's still clueless about her feelings. The next day, Mongwu asks to meet the king at night. Dalha plans to have Mongwu play the ignorant card while he is a nameless assassin who kills the king. Now, Mongwu and the king meet outside Yeoncheong. He saw her crying and he wipes her tears. He holds her hands to go inside, but she stops him with tears in her eyes, and it seems he knew the reason why. Episode 13 starts with the king asking Mong Wu if she has another lover hiding inside or that there's an assassin hiding ready to kill him. It turns out that the king knew everything of her plan. Mong Wu then asks him why he still came if he figured out the truth. Then he reminds her of his promise, stating that he will always come whenever she calls for him. At that moment, Chu Dalha attacks the king from behind, but Hee-Soo pulls him aside and gets stabbed instead. Now Hee-Soo is unconscious and the king is gravely worried and asks for physician's immediate care. Afterwards, Captain Joe was informed by the physician that she's a woman, and he tells him to report to him shall he get more information about her. The physician reveals that the newly appointed Royal Inspector General Kim Jae-nam had earlier asked him to hide Hee-Soo's truth. When the king summons Jae-nam, he doesn't hide anything. He mentions that he initially joined forces with Hee-Soo for the kingdom's betterment, but now realizes that the king is not what he thinks he is and he no longer supports their plan. He requests the king to spare Hee-Soo's life and listen to her before punishing her. Until he reveals that she is Master Kang Hang-soon's daughter, the king is dumbfounded in disbelief. For the time being, he then asks Master Kaem to take care of Hee-Soo as he did before, then he returned to the palace. Meanwhile, Court Lady Dong bribes the nurse who takes care of Mong Wu and finds out that she is a woman. Soon after, Captain Joe informs King Lee that Hee-Soo is now awake. The king wants to run to her but takes a step back to avoid more trouble. At night, when Hee-Soo went out for fresh air, she meets the king. She thought he'll not come for her anymore as her crime towards him is unforgivable. However, King Lee says he understands her. Just then her maid came back to give her a coat, but when she saw her with the king she goes back and bickers with Captain Ju to leave the place, but he didn't budge. Then Lee Jin reveals to Mong Wu that he also did a crime 3 years ago. At the very start, he knew that Mong Wu came for revenge, so he purposely put her on his side as his Gerdaryong. He should have executed her for her repeated crimes while she works for him, but when he learned that she's not swayed to be with the Queen Dowager's side, he changed his mind. Short after, Hee-Soo reveals that she intends to have him assassinated because of what she heard during his talk with Director Park. King Lee says she must have sick and tired of him so she wants him killed. However, Hee-Soo tells him that she must have done it but her love to him appeared to be much bigger than that of his crimes. Then Lee Jin hugs her and let her feel his heartbeat. He tells her he'll protect her and will make sure not to lose her again. Afterwards, King Lee reveals that her father, Master Kang Hang-soon, is alive. He works as the king's spy to evaluate the situation between the Qing and Ming dynasties. It also appears that Lee Jin has been searching for his master's daughter for over 3 years. After clearing the misunderstanding, Lee Jin interrogates Chu Dalha, who tried to assassinate him. The king mentions that he never think of Dalha as the Qing's spy, adding that since he is a righteous man, he'll give him 2 options: either hide his crimes and live his life far away or accept his crimes and be punished. Afterwards, Dalha not only confesses to his crimes, but also requests King Lee to open an investigation. Then upon knowing this, Park requests the king to hand him over the investigation related to the Jadaryong, Chu Dalha and even Myung-ha. However, the king tells him Chu Dalha has already confessed his crimes, but he has something to report. Park seems shocked and tongue-tied as the king mentions that he wants to investigate the real traitor. Director Park understands that the king has found out the truth and wants to bring him down. But Park doesn't want to give up and starts with another plan. Jae-nam is summoned to the court and he also realizes that the king suspects Park to be the real man behind his late king's death, the spy mission and other treason. Jae-nam agrees to help the king in finding evidence to prove the criminal guilty. When Myung-ha and 3 other ministers who don't join hands with Park have a private meeting, they ask Myung-ha why his late father states that Lee Jin is the mastermind behind the spying. Myung-ha remembers Hyunbo telling his father that Dalha and Lee Jin often meet in the courtesan house. However, Myung-ha realizes that the king only met Dalha now, which means 3 years back they had no clue about each other. This prompts Myung-ha to rush out and threatens Hyunbo. He tells him he'll have him be interrogated beside Dalha and be punished as well. Meanwhile, the Queen Dowager is silent as his brother Park tells her the truth that he is the mastermind who brought spy and colluded with the Qing 3 years ago. He is also the man who killed the late king, so Jin Han will ascend the throne. He thinks he can control Jin Han once he became king. But things are not going the way he wants it to be, so he'll make sure Jin Han will go down and crumble before he'll do it to him. Afterwards, Hee-Soo asks the king why he did not mention to her about Dalha being interrogated. She asks if is it because she's a woman. But the king replies, it is because she is his woman. After Hee-Soo asks if he suspects Park as the man behind the spying and killing the late king, she came to realize that Lee Jin Han is in the state of power struggle. She mentions that since 3 years ago, she's captivated in taking revenge, to dethrone him as the king until he crumbles into pieces. But in hindsight, she failed to see what he's really trying to do. She's worried that going against Park might put his life in danger. The king says he did a great crime 3 years ago, and it is killing him every day. He thinks Hee-Soo will turn her back on him once she'll find out about it. But it turns out that Hee-Soo already knew about the matter, and while he tears in desperation, she hugs him telling that he ascended the throne to protect the Grand Prince, the princess, and even the nation. She tells him not to be captivated by it, adding that she'll stay by his side, she'll support him and will endure with him no matter what. The same day, Hee-Soo meets Myung-ha and assures that the king is working on their behalf, but he gets mad as she's the one who plots a revenge plan. The following day, King Lee's only witness is the court lady, but before he can meet her, Director Park hands her a box and tells her to end her life. Now, fearing for her life, she takes the box and prepares for the night. She eats some of it and applies some on her lips. At the king's room, he asks her to tell the truth about Director Park and promises to save her from the punishment. She agrees, but with a condition saying it is her last request. The king asks what wish she needs and she comes closer to kiss him as the episode ends. As court lady Dong approaches King Lee, he rejects her saying he will only be exploited once it happened again. But as he confesses her love for him, she coughs up blood. The king is petrified and calls for eunuch Kim to bring the royal physician. Before she breathes her last, Lady Dong tells him about Director Park's words that killing Lee Jin was the only way she would survive. She tells him she had taken an oath to protect and cherish him until her last days. She then sacrificed herself to not let others succeed in their plan. Immediately, the king went to confront his mother on what she knew about Court Lady Dong's death. His mother remains to be silent, but when provoked, she says he must behead Chu Dao-ha as he's the reason why all those things are happening. He confronts his mother why she's covering his uncle's activities. As Lee Jin is prepared to interrogate his uncle, his mother shrieks tearfully that she would rather die than see that day. Now that Lady Dong is gone, Director Park is confident that the king is now defenseless and that Myung-ha will not take any step because of the crown prince. Shortly after, Myung-ha meets with Hee-Soo. He reveals to her that he knows the king is now working up on the late king's words to make Munseong the king. He realized it when Park asked him to join the coup. He did find it unusual that he was pardoned from a death penalty and sent off to the border instead after his father was named a traitor. He tells Hee-Soo to inform the king that he would attend himself the interrogation of the principal director. Hee-Soo warns him, but Myung-ha says there is no other way as Park will surely cover up his crimes and the Qing troops might captivate the king once again. Meanwhile, Hyun-bo prepares to flee the country. He plans to seek refuge in Qing with Prince Rue, but he is caught red-handed. The next day, the king summons the judges for interrogation. In a flashback, the king gives his uncle a chance to admit his crime and will not be interrogated in public to avoid being put into shame. But the more he challenged the king stating he didn't commit any. Now, the interrogation begins. Park was ordered to remove his formal attire, but he protests that he is only there to clear his name. The king directly asks him for whom did he ploy to get the former late king killed. Park retorts he didn't do it. He was then asked what's his reason for ordering Lady Dong to kill King Lee Jin. Park denies all allegations and asks if Lee Jin has any evidence to prove it. As he prepares to leave, Hyun-bo appears as a witness. Hyun-bo narrates all of Park's misdeeds. Jae-nam asks Hyun-bo why did he share such details about him. In a flashback, Myung-ha threatens Hyun-bo that he would reveal his deeds 3 years ago and request him to be punished just like what his late father received. Scared of his life, Hyun-bo confesses that he participated in plotting treason with the principal director. As expected, Park protests Hyun-bo's attestation, but the king orders to disrobe Park and begin the torture until he admits. Afterwards, Lee Jin asks for privacy to speak with his uncle. Lee Jin says that he prepared himself for this day after the late king passed away. Park asks him if that is the way he rewards his subjects' loyalty, but the king retorts that colluding with the enemy and assassinating the king is not loyalty, but selfish means of wielding himself by using a king's power. The king admits he made mistake and he wants everything to be set right. Park calls him a lowly worm and spits on him. Unfazed, he ordered Park to be confined until his punishment is decided. After the tiring day, the king is emotionally and physically drained. He says he feels hollow and afraid at the same time, but Mong-woo says it is normal to have such kind of feelings and that he did it good so far. Lee Jin pulls him close and Mong-woo pats his back. She asks him to return and take a rest, but Lee Jin says staying with her already gives him rest. The next day, the king reads out the punishment. Dal-ha will be flogged 80 times and will have to work 3 years of hard labor. Furthermore, Hyun-bo will be exiled from the capital. While Park Jong-hwan's punishment is yet to be revealed. Short after, Myung-ha was called by the king. He falls to his knees and confesses that the offer of joining the treason did sway his mind for a while and asks for his punishment. Thereafter, the king says his punishment is to witness the principal director's final moments. The Queen Dowager asks Lee Jin to show mercy on Park, but he is unshaken. Furious, she leaves without any escort. The next day, Park Jong-hwan's punishment is carried out. He is still vengeful about the king's actions and says that this is what one gets for being loyal to the king. The series of events are now quickly moving and the king orders Jae-nam and the Minister of War to be on high alert against Qing. However, the chief secretary arrives with the news that the Qing envoy has arrived with a document approving of the crown prince's appointment. Turns out that the letter is the one that Park wrote to Prince Rue wherein he is seeking his help against Lee Jin. The letter also mentions the emperor's wish to play baduk with Mong-woo. Lee Jin is not happy and he didn't tell it to Mong-woo. After their game, Mong-woo leaves and finds that he has been invited to Qing. In the morning, as soon as the dowager learned that Mong-woo is a woman, she calls for her, saying she's destined to be her daughter-in-law, and to serve the king as his concubine. She bestows her with gifts. And while she orders her maids to change her robes, Lee Jin comes in and stops the charade. The Queen Dowager is reluctant but asks her servants to leave. She tells Lee Jin to make Hee-Soo his concubine. That way, the Qing won't be able to touch her in any way. Lee Jin states that he could make her the queen instead. He adds that he will not send Hee-Soo to Qing nor make her his concubine. Her mother wants Lee Jin to produce an heir to the throne, but she never considered Hee-Soo to be the queen. She expresses her fear that the crown prince would eradicate the current royal family. But Lee Jin says it will happen once he is dead. Outside, he asks Hee-Soo if she was hurt after hearing she won't be his concubine. She says that she would have resented and cut him off from her life if he did. Lee Jin mentions that he was indeed swayed for a moment, but his mother's words brought him back to senses. Hee-Soo asks when was he going to tell her about the emperor's summons, and he says he would have never told her. He says he is firm on not sending her to Beijing and leaves. At the court, Jae-nam tries to convince Lee Jin to send Mong-woo to Beijing and to issue a decree for a new queen. Only then can they get the public support and ensure there is no resistance from the court regarding the Border Defense Council's removal. Jae-nam later talks to Hee-Soo that he asks for it because he thinks it would be good for her to be away from Lee Jin. The next morning, Mong-woo talks to Lee Jin that he wants to go to Qing. Lee Jin is angry, but Mong-woo tries to make him see that it is a chance to get closer to the emperor and gain his trust. By this, she will know what really is their intention. She also wants to see his father, whom she hasn't seen for years. Though hesitant, he still approves it. When he's about to leave, Mong-woo back hugs him while thanking him for allowing her. Meanwhile, Hyun-bo, who is in exile, is living a miserable life. He ends up killing his servant after he tells him he's still living like a nobleman when he is already an exiled criminal. Hyunbo runs away into the forest and ends up straight to Dalha. They both end up fighting, but Dalha manages to slit his throat. The next day, Lee Jin has sent Mong-woo some attire. He sent a pretty dress for her to wear. As they meet, he is stunned by her beauty. He tells her that they will be spending the day together as an ordinary couple. They stop by a lake and Lee Jin shows her how to skip stones over water, but she beats him there. He takes her to a cottage and he tries to get the flame working. At night, Hee-Soo mentions that she had a dream 3 years ago that he had visited her at the state tribunal. He says it wasn't a dream, for he really went there to see her. He then asks her to not act rashly against the Qing emperor. He worries that her blazing eyes might catch the emperor's attention. He asks her to lose at least once of the 3 baduk games so that the emperor won't keep her until he wins. Lastly, he asks her to remember that she is his jitterying. Then she also makes a few requests. First is to not shed tears and trouble Mr. Zhou in her absence. Second is to not be alone at Yanchijang. And last, he must appoint a new queen soon. He cuts her off by kissing her. Then she asks why he has not asked for her name yet. While Mong-woo is away, the days are being turned into months and Lee Jin misses her. He says he will not return to Yanhaijing until she is back. The place is to be locked until she returns. It's almost 1 year and Myung-ha's friend keeps writing a letter to Mong-woo inquiring about his whereabouts and informing about the reforms in Joseon. Myung-ha, who is now the 3rd Minister of War, tells his friend to stop writing as Mong-woo never responds. Short after, the princess is returning to the capital after the sudden death of Prince Rue. And Myung-ha expects Mong-woo to return as well, but there are rumors that Mong-woo is now the emperor's jitterying. When Lee Jin is about to leave, Jae-nam and other ministers greet him with the news about Qing's envoy. The envoy has reached Moa guest house. He approves Jun Jae-pyo to receive the envoy and the princess. After he leaves, Jae-nam puts his concern across that Jae-pyo is planning to side with the emperor and become a spy for Qing, now that Prince Rue is gone. Lee Jin notes the concerns and assures them that he has a plan in mind. Outside, Myung-ha seems to have seen Hee-Soo somewhere, so he visits her at night instead. She informs Myung-ha that Dao-ha stayed back with her father in Beijing and that she came back with Bun-young. However, Hee-Soo has no plan to inform the king of her return. She plans to leave again after the princess and Bun-yang safely return to their posts. She requests Myung-ha to keep quiet about the matter. At the palace, Bun-young greets the king. He thanks her for her support in providing reports on the Qing royal family. She informs that Prince Rue grew fearful of him since the execution of the principal director. Then he grants her permission to ask for a gift, but she politely refuses. Then the Qing envoy asks about handing over the criminal who went against the emperor, Jun Jae-pyo. There is evidence showing that Prince Rue plotted treason just before his sudden death. Jun Jae-pyo is commanded to confess his crimes and be beheaded as punishment for being a part of the ploy. Meanwhile, Mong-woo says he will leave at daybreak and seek refuge in Master Comb's residence, but he has not decided anything further than that. Myung-ha asks him to send a word from time to time as Sang-hyo is also worried about her. The next day, Sang-hyo calls Myung-ha for the morning assembly, but Myung-ha says they won't need to attend. The king is leaving and informs Myung-ha that the assembly is postponed. Sang-hyo is surprised that Myung-ha knew that beforehand. While Mong-woo and her maid begin their journey towards Master Kam's place, they decided to stop for a while. Mong-woo talks about the clear skies and the maid says it would be difficult if it rained. The maid heads away to fetch some fresh water while Mong-woo is taking in the fresh air. When he gets up, she saw a tree. She remembers Lee Jin and went down to see the tree. There, she saw him alone sitting while playing baduk. He asks what took her so long. Mong-woo wonders how Lee Jin knows they're passing there. Then Lee Jin says that Myung-ha informed him. He asks if she would have truly left without seeing him. He asks if she has someone new in her heart. Hee-Soo says she has no place for a new one. Then she asks Lee Jin why he's still alone. But Lee Jin says he wasn't alone as he always had her in his heart. Hee-Soo said that she was waiting for a rain shower to meet him again, just like they had met the first time. But he says there's no need to wait for a drizzle anymore. Then he leans in for a kiss, filling up the long empty days of not seeing each other. At the mountain, the maid sees Mr. Jo and breaks down in tears. She asks what takes them so long to come. She says Hee-Soo has been waiting for Lee Jin for so long. Mr. Jo is flustered and apologizes. Meanwhile, Mong-woo and Lee Jin engage in a baduk game and she finally reveals her name. Lee Jin says that he will no longer allow her to be separated from him and will spend the rest of their lives together, a hint that he will be taking her as his queen. This ends the story of Lee Jin Han and Kang Mong-woo. If there's one best lesson from them, it is to avoid being captivated by something that will make us perish at the end.